Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and today I want to talk about a few different trends that are going on in the United States that are going to matter going forward. And we're talking about quite a few of them. Two big ones, but maybe we'll talk about some other things. Um, Before we get too far into it, a like, a comment, and a subscription is greatly appreciated, and I thank y'all for continuing to support this channel. Subscriptions, of course, help me grow as a channel, and the more subscribers we have, the more views I tend to get, and of course, the more the channel can grow. So if you haven't already, please do so. And of course, likes and comments help the algorithm not hate me. So the map I've got here is a little bit interesting. Actually, I should probably put the Dakotas in this, and actually Nebraska too, to an extent. I'm not really sure where Missouri falls, but I'm going to assume they're gaining population. So I also think Hawaii is, and to an extent DC as well. So the states in blue are, for the most part, not losing population, but they're losing population relative to the rest of the nation. So they're not growing as fast as the rest of the country is. They're growing at a below average rate. Whereas the states in red are the states that are gaining population faster than the average. So these are states that are most likely to be gaining power, politically speaking. And you're going to notice quite a few of them are some pretty red states for the most part. There are of course, exceptions, such as here along the West Coast, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, Virginia, and Georgia, North Carolina too. But most of these states are growing very quickly. Arizona, pretty swing. Hawaii is deep blue. But of course, there's also some very deep red states that are losing population. West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana come to mind immediately. And it has a lot to do with a lot of economic factors. There's a lot more job opportunity in places like Texas, and Florida, and Georgia, and North Carolina, Arizona, Colorado, Seattle, Portland, just Washington, Oregon in general. As well as some of these states are just, for some reason, more desirable to live in. Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, the Dakotas, the Deep South. Yes, Alabama's kind of the exception, and I really could put it in the losing population category, but I suspect Alabama is going to start growing pretty quickly. And Mississippi also could fall into that category. But as a whole, the Sun Belt and the Mountain West, Desert Southwest, and Washington, Oregon. California lost a House district for the first time ever, and I'm not sure that trend is going to slow down. I just don't think that's going to happen. So I suspect California is actually going to wind up losing electoral votes. Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, as well as Illinois. If I had to guess which states are going to lose electoral votes the next census, so let's just clear off everything. Next census, I'm going to highlight states in blue will gain a vote, states in red will probably lose a vote in the next census. Have to clear everything again. Actually, Vermont's not growing too slowly either. So, these are my candidates for states that will probably lose in the next census. Whereas states that I expect to gain well, the obvious candidates are Texas, Florida, Arizona for sure, Utah, Nevada, both should gain. I'm not sure about Colorado. Idaho really should be gaining a vote. North Dakota should be gaining a vote at some point. Georgia, North Carolina, and I'm trying to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I'm going to throw 2 more in there. I'm going to go ahead and just say that the entire southeast corridor should probably be gaining congressional districts. Those would be my picks. And of course, I could see some other things. But as you can tell, population is leaving the Northeast and the Rust Belt and Midwest, as well as California, and they're flowing to these Mountain West states, the Southeast Corridor states, Sun Belt states, Texas, big time, as well as some of these Northern Great Plains states. And there are a ton of reasons for that, just in general. But it always just depends on a lot of factors. Rhode Island may or may not lose a seat as well. They probably should. So now states that are trending towards one party or another. And we're going to focus on some pretty big ones. Not West Virginia. And we're going to start with states that are trending towards Democrats pretty heavily. We'll talk about California. Who am I kidding? No, we won't. And yeah, in general, in Mississippi, we won't talk about it, but yeah. And you can make an argument for Minnesota. But really, I should be just highlighting certain regions. So, overall, the Desert Southwest is trending towards the Democrats, as well as the Northern Pacific Coast states. Alaska, I should highlight too. Whereas this part of the country is trending pretty heavily towards the Republicans. We'll talk about Maine, and there's a lot of reasons for this, of course. And, well, it has to do with, of course, a lot of the population movement, but a lot of the people who are living in a lot of these Rust Belt areas, number one, a lot of them are retiring and deciding to move south, and they are legacy Democrats, old school Democrats. And now they're leaving, and a lot of the conservatives are just staying. Not entirely the case everywhere, and there are exceptions per region. For example, there's some good arguments to be made that Minnesota is trending towards the Democrats. Nevada and New Mexico, you can make some reasonable arguments for at least Nevada trending towards the Republicans. I can make arguments that New York is trending towards the GOP, but that's not necessarily entirely 100% the full picture. You can make a similar argument that Illinois just isn't trending either direction. But overall, the point is that when you split things up at the regional level, you can actually kind of understand where certain regions are going to be going, and it's just a matter of, okay, how fast, at what rate, and you just move on from there. Of course, there are quite a few areas, for example, where, just kind of highlighting this, if we look at just the old, well, a lot of people would say Confederacy. You know, Virginia's already pretty much a blue state. Some people would say Georgia is, until we get more evidence, I'm going to leave it as a red state. But the reality is, truth is, those are actually swing states. Of course, a lot of people would say, really, are you calling those southern? You know, this is the South to a lot of people. Maybe throw in Arkansas and Tennessee. You can also throw in North Carolina. But a lot of people would say that's really the core of the South. I tend to break it down into a few different areas where your view really just depends on a lot of things. Number one, where do you draw the line the further out from this deep South core you get? So historically, there's been, of course, the very deep, deep, deep South, which a lot of people say is just these 5 states. I throw in Arkansas too, and I actually include Tennessee in the deep South. Beyond that, though, you have what has historically been called the Southern Periphery. Which includes, North Carolina, Virginia, Kentucky, West Virginia too, though West Virginia is pretty much just Appalachian. Texas and Florida, parts of Missouri and Oklahoma fall into that, but a lot of people will just leave them off. And there's a lot of good geographic reasons why you should do this. Number one, you've got the Potomac, and then the Ohio River bounding it, and you've got a little bit of vagueness over here near Morgantown and the Pennsylvania border. And then, of course, you go down to the Mississippi, that's a pretty good area to just say that's the South. And then you cross it, Arkansas and Louisiana are very similar climatically to, say, this entire Mississippi River Valley in this part of the valley. And once you start getting into even Oklahoma, a lot of southeastern Oklahoma looks very similar to, say, parts of Alabama or Georgia or Mississippi. It's not exactly the same. There's a lot of difference, but it's not entirely within the Great Plains, which is a little bit more northern than that. Now, some people are going to make arguments about, well, where are certain things trending? But you can split it up further and talk about the trends. For example, it's very important to know that there's this southeastern corridor, which basically runs from Florida through to Virginia. And it's important to know that other than Florida, the region is trending towards the Democrats. Though North Carolina may be an exception. And if you get to, say, the desert Southwest, you talk about the exact same thing. And the reason why you split it up, though Texas really should be considered its own entity. So when I'm referring to, say, various regions, that's the desert Southwest to me. But also, I consider this to be the Mountain West. Notice there's overlap. And that's okay. Pacific Coast, pretty easy. Midwest and Rust Belt is that region. You could also add New York and just call it the Great Lakes region. I really just call these the Plains states right here. New England is probably one of the few universally accepted regions right there. And then I call this the Mid-Atlantic because it's easier for me to do that. That's the way I do it. So And again, there was overlap there too. But yeah, so really, if you're wanting to look at the trends and where the nation is going to be going politically, look at where the population is migrating to and look at who among that population is migrating. Because it really does matter and it helps us understand where things are going to be going. So that's going to be where I'm going to end it. I want to thank everybody for watching, and I hope you all enjoyed. See you next time. Take it easy. Bye-bye.